Luke Walker Animal Stick Up For Her by Violet Plum. Chapter 8. Luke Walker and the Recycling. Luke laughed. Stop it! I'm nearly finished. Let me finish. Luke was sitting on the straw in Curly's shed, trying to knit a blanket for Squirt. Curly had given birth to little Squirt a few days after she arrived at her new home, and he was the most playful, affectionate, adorable little chap Luke had ever met. Curly hadn't let Luke come near him at first, but after a while she let Squirt go to him. Hey! I nearly dropped another stitch. Okay, that's it. I'm putting it away. I'll have to finish it at home. Luke preferred to do his knitting in the shed on his plot, because at home Jared teased him for it. He had laughed when Luke first asked Nan to teach him. Knitting? That's what girls do. You wish you were a girl, don't you, Luke? It's just like making knots at Scouts, Jared. Don't you make knots at Scouts? Yeah, knots are useful for camping and sailing and stuff boys do. And knitting is turning string into material to make blankets or mats or clothes or tents or anything. He believed an outlaw should have the skills to make his own things and be self-sufficient. Knitting was a useful skill. Nan had been very happy to teach him. Luke put the half-made blanket back in his bag and played with Squirt until it was time to go home for tea. He had to be home promptly today because it was Mum's shopping night and he needed to go with her for his school project. This half-term's topic was the environment, and Mrs. Tebbet had started by talking to them about rubbish, waste and plastic pollution, which was of great interest to Luke. On the board she wrote, "Reduce, reuse, recycle." This week we are going to think about how we can reduce waste by the simple choices we make in our lives, she began. Although the amount of rubbish being recycled in this country has increased in recent years, the amount being sent to landfill is also on the increase. In England, we only recycle about 44% of household waste, when in fact 80% of it is recyclable. This means we all need to try a little bit harder. Or a lot harder, Luke mouthed to Joe. So today I'm going to tell you about the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. Have any of you heard of this before? Lots of blank faces and shaking of heads. Okay, well, the idea is that although recycling is very important, we should first try to reduce the amount of stuff we buy in the first place by holding on to the stuff we've already got for as long as possible, taking care of it and getting it repaired instead of throwing it away. Then, when our stuff is really worn out, when it can't be repaired anymore, before we throw it out for recycling, we should try to think of ways to reuse it. Old clothes, for example, could be turned into cleaning rags. And finally, when we can no longer find a use for something, we should recycle it. Interesting, thought Luke. Mrs. Tebbet continued. Now, can anybody think of ways in which we could reduce our waste in the first place? Several hands shot up. Yes, Andrew. Draw on both sides of the paper. Very good. Yes, Katia. Stick a note on your door that says no junk mail. Good thinking. Yes, Simon. Get your shoes resoled instead of buying new ones. Oh, yes, well done, Simon. Repair things instead of throwing them out. Good one. Okay, well done. You're all thinking now. What about the choices we make when we buy things like food? We have to buy food, but how can we reduce waste before we even get it home? The class went quiet again. Everyone was thinking, but they weren't quite sure what she was after. I'm thinking packaging here, she explained. We eat the food, but we throw away the packaging. How can we reduce that waste? Buy food with recyclable packaging, Butler shouted out. Yes, if we must, but what would be even better? Joe's eyes suddenly lit up and he opened his mouth as if to speak, but didn't. Mrs. Tebbit noticed. Joe, did you want to say something? Buy stuff without packaging, he said quietly. There were a few snickers. How are you going to do that? Everything comes in packets, someone scoffed. Joe went red and looked down at his hands. Mrs. Tebbit frowned. Quiet! Pay attention to Joe. He's got the right idea. She turned to Joe. Well done. That's exactly what I was looking for. We need to avoid the waste coming into our homes in the first place by choosing things with the least amount of packaging, and even no packaging when possible. Kenny, see me at the end of class. Mrs. Tebbit went on to explain their class project. A week on Friday, they would all make a presentation to the class in which they would explain how they had reduced waste in their household. They were to bring with them everything being thrown away in their house that week as visual aids, after it had been cleaned if necessary, and tell the class where that rubbish was headed, recycling or landfill. She gave them printouts which told them all about recycling. After tea on shopping night, Luke was rummaging through the kitchen drawers. Come on, Luke, if you want to come. I want to get this over with, said Mum. She hated shopping. I'm coming, said Luke, but didn't. What are you looking for? She asked. The shopping bags. I thought they were in here. So did I. Oh, I don't know. I might have put them in the wash. I don't know where they are now. Never mind. Just leave it. Let's go. Hang on, said Luke, and he rushed upstairs. Mum picked up the car keys and headed for the door. If you don't come now, Luke, I'm going without you. And she went outside. Just before she released the handbrake, Luke opened the passenger door and climbed in. On his lap, he clutched a large, crumpled pile of flower print and superhero pillowcases. What are you doing with those? Bags, he said. We need reusable bags. Mum inhaled deeply, checked the mirror, and reversed out of the drive. At Besco's, Luke watched her closely with his project in mind. To Mrs. Walker, it seemed like every time she reached for something, he said, No, not that. Get this one. She found it very trying, but at the same time was impressed with her son's commitment to the project and didn't want to curb his enthusiasm for anything school-related. She bit her tongue and cooperated with most of his suggestions. At the checkout, when the lady asked if she'd like any bags, Luke spoke out before she could answer in the affirmative. No thanks. It's very bad to get plastic bags. They make pollution. You should ban them. Then he put his pile of pillowcases onto the end of the checkout and started filling one with loose vegetables. Mum flashed the checkout lady an embarrassed smile and said, School project. When the day came for the presentations to the class, Luke, being low down on the alphabet, was one of the last. His peers were getting restless. They had already sat through 27 similar presentations in which they were shown similar empty packets, cartons and bottles being thrown out that week by each family. Those to be recycled included cereal boxes and their internal plastic bags, plastic milk bottles, plastic ketchup bottles, plastic shampoo bottles, Tetra Paks, glass wine bottles, beer bottles, plastic pop bottles, drink cans, food tins, and the like. Those to go to landfill included toothpaste tubes, toothbrushes, Brillo pads, polystyrene food trays, plastic straws, and crisp packets. Mrs. Tebbet herself was having trouble staying awake at this stage and decided that next year she would get the class to work on a single collective presentation for a school assembly. Luke waited for Susan Vickers to take her family's waste off the presentation table before walking to the front and standing awkwardly to face his class. "Okay, Luke, how have you reduced waste in your household this week?" asked Mrs. Tebbet. Luke reached into his bag and put onto the table 3 paper bags, 1 glass 1-litre bottle, and 2 empty baked beans tins. He looked at the class and spoke loudly to conceal his nervousness. "This is my waste for this week. The yellow and blue paper bag that had oats in will be recycled. The brown paper bread bags will go on the compost. The bottle and the baked beans tins will be recycled." Relieved that it was over, he waited for Mrs. Tebbet to tell him to stand down. She didn't. "That can't be all," she said. "I told you to show the class how much waste your household had produced and how you'd helped to reduce it." "I did." "This is all your family's waste for a whole week." "This is the reduced waste that I made 'em reduce. I don't think it's fair to include the things I told 'em not to buy. They're not my fault." "Luke, that wasn't the project. You've misunderstood." "I've done it fair. It's not fair to say I didn't do well making my family's waste smaller if my family won't do what I tell 'em. It's only fair to see what waste was made from choices I made 'em make." Mrs. Tebbet couldn't argue with that. "Explain. How is this the only waste you personally made this week?" Luke explained. "I told my mum not to buy the vegetables and fruit in plastic bags and nets and trays, 'cause we don't need 'em. We just throw 'em away as soon as we get home. So I just put it all loose in the trolley. I laid it on top of a soft bag so it didn't get bruises, and then I put it in our own bags when we paid for it." The fact that the bags to which he referred were actually pillowcases was an irrelevant detail unnecessary to divulge. "Okay, good. Loose fruit and veg. No need for packaging. What else?" "I told Mum to get the loose lentils and raisins and pasta that you can weigh instead of the ones in packets, and we put it in our bags we took with us that we can reuse." He paused, waiting for her to acknowledge receipt of this information. "Go on," she urged. "I told Mum to get me the porridge oats that come in just a paper bag instead of cereal that's in boxes and plastic bags. And we got flour and sugar in paper bags and bread in paper bags instead of plastic, and peanut butter in a glass jar with a metal lid, and vinegar and ketchup and apple juice and sunflower oil in glass bottles with metal lids. But we haven't finished all of them, so I only brought the juice bottle today. And 2 tins of beans. That's everything I ate, and I made my mum choose glass and tins because they can be recycled over and over back into bottles and food tins. But plastic is bad because it can only be cycled into things like plastic bricks and stuff that can't be recycled in the end. And plus, a lot of it ends up in the sea after they send it abroad to recycle it. So it's best not to get it in the first place." Mrs. Tebbet was lost for words. He had read the printouts. He had done the work. Impressively. She looked at the 3 paper bags, 1 glass bottle, and 2 baked beans tins, and was amazed at how simple it could actually be. "Well done, Luke," she said. "Very well done indeed." At the end of the day, when everyone else was going to get their coats, Mrs. Tebbet called Luke to her desk. "Good work today, Luke," she said. "Is this something you've been concerned about for a while? I mean, before we started our project?" Luke was unused to his teacher's friendly voice being directed at him, but he saw no harm in indulging her. "Yeah, Since I saw Spiker caught in the plastic rings and all the litter that hurts the animals, and since so many people are just stupid to keep dropping the litter, I thought the best thing to do is make shops stop selling it. Then there'd be nothing to drop, except maybe paper bags, but that won't hurt no one, and it won't last long. So I'm teaching my mum not to buy things with plastic. Well, Luke, that's wonderful. I'm very impressed, and I'm making new things out of old things as well. Being impressive was new to Luke. He couldn't stop now. So I'm recycling on myself and reducing the buying of new things because of fixing things and making new ones out of old ones. Mrs. Tebbet smiled. Really? What are you making? At the moment, he said proudly, I'm knitting a blanket for my pet lamb to keep him warm on chilly nights. Wonderful! And are you using recycled yarn from an unravelled jumper? Kind of, but no, not yarn, strips of material. She looked confused, so he tried to explain. I got the idea from me Nan's magazine about making rag rugs by cutting old material into strips and knotting them together to make long, long strips of it, and then knitting with it. It'll make a thick, soft blanket for Squirt to sleep on. Fantastic! What material are you using? What are you cutting up? Luke was glad she asked, because he'd put a lot of thought into that decision. He answered with the quiet confidence of a wise person enlightening a complete beginner. I decided the warmest stuff would be what blankets are made of, and I found 2 big blankets in the airing cupboard that nobody was using, so I used them. I'm nearly finished now. Mrs. Tebbet smiled again. You've got a good heart, Luke, she said. Off you go. Have a nice weekend. I'll see you Monday. Luke, almost overwhelmed by the unfamiliar sensation of being approved of, went to get his coat.